Great. Hey, Damon.
Hey Ryan, how are you?
Great, thanks. I appreciate you taking the time to come on and allow me to interview you.
Pleasure.
I'd, you mentioned we went back and forth before this. You're based in Australia at the moment and you're coming back you're going to be based in Dublin or Galway or,
Probably the West somewhere, close enough to Galway. We before we moved out here, we were based out near Kinvara in South Galway. So it's an area we really like and kind of where we have our eye on moving back to, but nothing is set in stone just yet.
amazing. It's a beautiful part of the world, the west of Ireland.
Yeah, I have a grand affinity for the coastline, particularly of the West. Um, We, I'm from Galway City originally, but we would have spent a huge amount of our summer holidays as a family traveling up and down long before it was called the Wild Atlantic Way, the roads, which eventually got that name, from all the way from Malin to Mizenhead, basically. So it's kind of I feel it's deeply etched in me, that kind of love for the West Coast and the land and the people and the culture and the spirit.
Brilliant. And is and when you're back in the west of Ireland, do you find that it enhances every area of your life, or do you prefer being down in Australia at the moment?
I miss I miss the West of Ireland. I miss Ireland generally. I miss Ireland when I'm here. Um, Something that when you live outside of Ireland, um, you realize very quickly is um, the depth of the community spirit we have and the unusual level of care that we have for each other. Um, and when that's missing, it is something that is sensed, at least I sense it quite strongly. So, and that's not something I want to live without in my life. I think it's really important. I feel it's really important to me. So I'm looking forward to getting back and embedding in that community again. And yeah, and filling that hole.
Incredible. And I was doing a bit of research before we chatted, and it mentions that you're based originally from Galway, which you chatted the west of Ireland, but you were a professional rugby player as well in a former life. And I'd love to know your experience. It said you were 16 years at clubs in Connacht, Northampton, Saints, Brive, Leinster, and there was another club in France, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Tough one to pronounce.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to know how you got into rugby. Was it the early age? Were you playing it in Galway or?
Yeah, we're from Renmore, which is just on the way into Galway on the Dublin Road, if you want, and it's basically a stone's throw from Galwegians rugby club. So when I was 10 or so, my mum was involved in Galway Hockey Club, and she got me into hockey. I think probably looking for an outlet for a very curious 10-year-old. And at the same time, a lot of my friends. Had started going up to rugby. So I was going off to hockey, they were going to rugby, and I was kind of watching them going. I'm not really, I'd like to be where they're going, basically. So the next season, the next year, I said, listen, I want to go play rugby. I don't want to do that hockey thing anymore. They're like, grand. So off I went, 11 years old, up to Go Agents on a Saturday morning. And from the very first training session, I just knew this sport wasn't for me. Like it was just, um, there was one particular moment where that connection literally rung through me, and it was this moment where I was faced with a decision to make a tackle and um, to perform, for want of a better word, this almost leap of faith. Right? There's a load of you're 11 year old, you never played the sport before. There's a load of like resistance, and you're like, I have to jump into this thing. I have to let go here. And I did. After those nanoseconds of hesitation, that feel like a lifetime, I suppose, when you're faced with them. And I dived and tried to make the tackle. The kid who had the ball kind of kept running as I was trying to tackle him, and I slid down his body as he continued to kind of run, and his trailing foot, kind of slid up, and just at the end, as I hit the ground, it slid into my chin and kind of sent this reverberation through my body. Um, and I could take you to that very spot now, 34 years later, on that pitch. And that was the moment. That was it. Me and rugby, it was a match made in heaven from that point, and I just loved it, and I became very obsessed with the sport very quickly, and was lucky enough then when the year I did my leaving cert to I was actually invited into the Connacht senior team to train with them just before I was doing my leaving cert that summer, and then the next year I was training with them again, and then the year after that I was contracted. So it all, in terms of a kind of a time frame, it was all very kind of condensed and fast, and I really got fast tracked into the sport because of my size. And yeah, lucky enough to play then for 16 years professionally.
Sounds like a bit of a journey as well. You played under 19s, under 21s for Ireland or international honours. Was that a big step up at the time from the Connacht Academy or the Connacht setup?
It was, yeah. It's not like now, it'd be very hard for people to kind of get a visual of what that landscape was like. There was the formation of a national academy, and then there was the formation of provincial academies. But basically, it was just a kind of uh, very chosen group of maybe 9 or 10 that were just doing a bit of training every now and again together. But all your kind of training was done at club and school level. So to when we first, I say we because one of my best mates at the time was in that kind of place, Johnny O'Connor, and we kind of went through all of the trials together. Got called up to you start at you go to Clongowes, and they have like 60 or 70 people for the Irish 19s, and it gets whittled down. And myself and Johnny had this kind of um, uh, exact same path, which was amazing that we both got capped at like Irish under 19s at the same time, Irish under 21s at the same time, Connacht, Everton, up to seniors. We both made our debuts in the same game, So we went through that kind of journey together, and it was a big step up, but some reason one that we were both able to kind of make time and again when it was presented to us.
Brilliant. And I'd love to know the transition to Leinster as well, because you were part of the Heineken Cup win there. I don't know what year it was, but
2012.
2012. It was that must have been a pivotal moment in your career as a rugby player.
Yeah, it was amazing. Not so much. I mean, it was great to be part of the squad that won the Heineken Cup, but for me, the best thing about that period was being part of the environment and the coaching setup and the group of players that was, I say, luckily enough, all happened to come together at the same time. That was like a relief to me in terms of my rugby career. I feel like I felt at that point that I was constantly searching for an environment and people with the same standards as me. And when I got to Leinster, it was very clear inside a number of weeks that like, this was a place that people were here to be their best, do their best, and win stuff. And that was amazing to have that. To have all those things come together at the one time and be able to be part of that group and that environment for 2 years was amazing. Um, I really learned a lot about high performance during those 2 years and about the standards that um, must be demanded to have success. And there's still standards that I would weigh on, I suppose, to a certain extent now. So yeah, that was the big thing for me, was just having that exposure to those people and that place for 2 years, which was brilliant.
Sounds like it was very. I don't want to say it sounds like it was an environment that led you to thrive. You mentioned that you were looking for somewhere that you could that had similar standards or some a high performance team. Probably a
Mm.
very transformative environment.
Yeah, like I always held myself and still do hold myself to very high standards and demand more of myself than anyone could even imagine. Um, that I feel that's a really important place to operate out of if you want to make the most of your life. But at the same time, to have the opportunity to rub shoulders and be part of a group and individuals who were similarly like-minded was really important for me. Um, it's that connection piece that is um, is really um, enlightening in a way. Like it enlightens you about yourself because you're like, well, I'm not actually um, any different to these people. We're operating on a very similar wavelength here. So that was very kind of almost validating. And if you think about those years, like even though rugby players generally, they're held in high esteem um, in terms of their position in society, you're still young men and you're still learning about yourself. Now, it's a very, very formative period in terms of the intensity of it and the demands of it. But at the same time, you are still learning. So it was nice to kind of um, to be almost feel like um, a piece in a jigsaw that was not fitting, not fitting, not fitting, and then I fitted in there, and that was very, very important to me. It gave me the positioning internally to really push on in a few different areas. And then, you're learning from these guys. You're learning from the coaches in terms of you're absorbing at least, how they run an operation and um, how they deal with the demands of those leadership positions in high performance. So that was all very like the absorbance of all that has really benefited me post rugby.
And speaking of post rugby, you got into extreme adventures in 2017. You completed the Lonely Atlantic crossing solo in 63 days.
Yeah, among other things.
Yeah, 100%. You met you. There's a number of other things as well. I'd love to know
Yeah.
you that transition from rugby, which is a high performance environment, somewhere where you probably felt like the structure. I don't want to put words in your mouth here. Was and then you go to an extreme adventure. Were you looking for your next challenge, or was that something that was on your mind while you're playing the game?
So it was a couple of different things. The draw was a couple of different things. The first one was I was very much on a path from those 15 years and before them through professional rugby. I was very much on a path to push my body and mind to and past perceived limits. I took a outlier amount of agency on my performance through rugby, and I was very much drawn to that side of preparation, the physical and mental side, uh, and I had great rewards from it, and just been better and focusing on, those things and trying to be better and trying to be better. So throughout that journey in professional rugby, I'd kind of um, gone outside the environment and researched broadly on what other people were doing to push their limits and how they were challenging themselves to get more from themselves and to unlock their potential. So I discovered a lot of things, through reading books, through magazines, which were very popular through that period, and a spectrum from like bodybuilding to ultra endurance stuff, like running ultras, and what a bodybuilder was doing um, to put on more muscle mass on his frame, and how can I use that to be a better rugby player, and what the people all the way on the other side in like ultra endurance stuff, what they were doing to be mentally, particularly to be the best they could be, and how can I use that to be a better rugby player. So throughout that, I was throughout that research and the actioning of it, and then getting better through it, I was absolutely, I knew nothing, but I knew one thing that I was going to do, and I was going to continue that path, whatever way I could figure out to do it. And the way I figured out to do it was through adventure. So I'd always been a curious individual. I traveled quite extensively. If I had a break from rugby, you'd find me at the airport going somewhere, just traveling. So um, it was a case of the two things being put together. Then, well, I can this extreme adventure thing. I can have these amazing experiences. I can travel. Sorry, I can challenge myself deeply. I can continue to grow mentally, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually through that, and I can see the world. And so that, you know, what I knew I was going to do was not be an extreme adventure. What I knew I was going to do was there was things I wanted to do with my life that I discovered that I was going to do with my life in that period, and then it kind of just eventually became. I eventually just started calling myself an extreme adventurer. But at the very kind of start of that journey, when I just retired, it was all about just pushing myself and doing these things, using my life to do these things, using the time I had to do these things with my life.
And I'd love to know, in 2022, you rode from New York to Galway, covering over 3,000 miles in 112 days, arriving on the 4th of October, becoming the first person to complete the route. I'd love to know. That sounds like an experience that no other human has pushed themselves to that limit.
Well, uh, what I can say is that I have never. I spent my lifetime searching out things to push myself physically, mentally, emotionally, and on a character level, spiritually, and nothing has touched that challenge anywhere close. It was soul-destroyingly difficult, and that's what I wanted. I wanted it to be that. Like that's really important. Like that's my mindset. I'm not looking for challenge. I'm not looking to run a, I don't know, do a tough mudder. I'm looking for sincere and genuine challenge to broaden my boundaries as a human, make me more human, more self-aware, more conscious, more grounded, more humble, sharpen my values. So to get those outcomes, you gotta be pushed into these places of real challenge. And you gotta go into these spaces of really difficult um, uh, states, of deep doubt, deep insecurity, and you gotta find the way out of them. So I wanted all of that, and that adventure, that challenge gave it to me tenfold. And the real, to to put some shape or put some picture on that, the reason it was so difficult is, well, firstly, it's the North Atlantic. So it's kind of this basket case section of ocean on the planet where there's no constant weather um, patterns. It's very inconsistent, so much so that you can get up at 9 a.m. and the wind can be blowing north, and then at 9 p.m. that same day it can be blowing south. So it's all these little microcosms, and the biggest manipulator of an ocean rowing boat by far is the wind. So with um, over the course of 3,000 miles, I just got very, very, very unlucky with the wind direction that I had to face. So, what we calculated afterwards to put a kind of a bracing figure on this for people was that I rode closer to 3,006 or 700 nautical miles because I went backwards about 6 to 700 miles during the course of the 112 days. Um, so once I stopped rowing, most days, and particularly the second half of the expedition, the boat would just start going backwards. So like I'd be 15 minutes off the oars and I'd be looking at my distance to Galway basically, or distance to my next what we call waypoints, and I'd just be watching the numbers turn backwards, getting further away. Um, and you do that for 2 or 3 days, that's going to really deeply challenge you. You do that for 60 days, it will fucking break your heart. Like it will be like nothing you've ever experienced. It's just like you feel like you're in ocean rowing purgatory. You're just not going anywhere, right? And all this effort that you have to put in, like inside 3 or 4 strokes, if you look at the speedometer on the boat, you know that whatever I do today in the 12 hours I row is probably going to be gone, taken away from me, and more tonight. And you just got to keep going, keep going, keep going. So you got to really dig into parts of yourself that you've never accessed before, and try to summon the energy to keep going every day. So you learn a lot about yourself.
And what was it like arriving at the finish point? Was it? It must have been a very euphoric moment, or a big weight lifted off your shoulders, or
Um, Well, it's a story in itself. So I arrived into Galway Bay through the two of the little Aran Islands, the two smallest, Inisheer and Inishmaan. There's a little sound there called Foul Sound. Um, so I got there in the middle of 30/35 knot winds. So kind of the I suppose the starting end of what you would call a storm, and that storm was blowing me north. So it was quite useful actually when I got to in the approach to the islands because it was blowing the boat right through them. But when I had to turn the boat to the east and row into the bay, the boat goes sideways on then to that wind, and the wind just there's nothing you can do. Like it doesn't matter if there was 4, 6, 8 people on that boat. You're just not going to keep it in a easterly approach because the all the what they call the windage, the sides of the boat are just get hit by that wind and just continue to blow north, even though you're rowing east, you're going north, and there's fuck all you can do about it. So I had this plan to get inside kind of Blackhead, which is um, the most northerly point of the Clare side of Galway Bay, and then I'd have some shelter from that wind. But I hadn't slept. I'd slept 5 hours in 3 days at that point, so I was deeply fatigued, and the more I rode, the more further north I got blown. So my plan just was not going to be in any way, feasible. So I got to a point as I continued to try and make headway into the bay where I suppose eventually, to cut a long story short, eventually I got pushed onto the rocks. So my I was on day 112, so 112 days, like fighting basically not for my life, but with my life to get across the ocean. And I get to the one part of that ocean that I know really well, Galway Bay. And that's where I mess up, right? And that's where I end up getting pushed onto the rocks. So I had this like I fought so hard like to try and get into Galway and have that big, as you described, euphoric, emotional moment. And I ended up on the rocks at 1 a.m. on my own in a place called Furbo, which is about 7 miles from Galway City on the north shore of the bay. Um, and yeah, my first feeling was failure. My first feeling was I failed. I was absolutely gutted. Like, if you imagine the fight, right, over such a period, and it's taken so much to get to that point, and you've had these driving visions of like the docks in Galway, thrown into the docks, and then it was all taken away in that moment. Um, yeah, that's what I felt. Of course, it wasn't too long until I was able to come around, just through my own reflections and reasoning of the situation, but also talking to other people and seeing the effects that the expedition and the sharing of it had on them. So, but yeah, that was my first feeling.
That must have been to go that far, and the first feeling to be failure must is that something you felt before in any of your other either professional
Um,
rugby or in any of the other
oh,
ventures
yeah,
or
yeah, but not so like you know, if you have a shit game and you're playing rugby, like the reality is, no matter how bad you feel about it, at the end, at the back of your head, you're like, there's next week, but there was never that opportunity will never come again. And uh, yeah, it really like it deeply, deeply kind of hit me at that moment. I was just broken because of the finish. Um, So I never had it, I suppose, so clearly. But I mean, I've had many failures, and I will continue to have many failures into the future. That's just part of the process of pushing for more and high performance and exploring yourself and your limits. You fail all the time, and it's not such a bad thing. Doesn't feel great sometimes, but it can be very healthy. And you can learn a lot from it. You learn a lot more from failing than you will from succeeding. So I'm not afraid of it. But at that moment, it was really, really like it was just the height of I don't know, the emotional investment and the deep fight to get to that point, and the apex of that was like it was never an apex I sat on before, and then for it all to kind of come crashing down in that moment, it was upsetting, but yeah, I got over it pretty quickly.
and did you find that was similar when you did the ultra marathon as well? You ran 257-kilometer ultra marathon across the Sahara and climbing five of the seven summits. Was that emotion of failure the same for the other adventures, or
Well, apart from, so there's two that stick out that you could kind of deem were failures. The first one is Everest, when I tried to climb Everest in 2021. So it was the height of COVID, and um, uh, it wasn't there was no personal mistake in such that cost me um summiting Mount Everest. It was circumstantial. A lot of the expedition got closed down um about, I don't know, like 6 hours before I was about to start my summit push. So it's a 5-day window going up the mountain, different points. So I'd eaten my last meal at base camp, and I was ready to push. And then we got kind of called into a meeting and told that like all the Sherpa have COVID at Camp 2 and Camp 4. We don't have enough Sherpa to support you. It's not something. So we just have to close down the expedition. So, I mean, I was disappointed, but I didn't particularly like. I'll call it a failure, like, but not not due to anything I did as such. So yeah, nowhere near what I felt in that moment on the rocks in Furbo. Not even in the same stratosphere. And the other one then was more recently, like I completed the Mountain des Sables, which is known as the world's toughest foot race. It's not, but it's still a particularly challenging event. 250 kilometers over 6 days through the Sahara Desert self-supported. That's my second time doing it, and I went back with real focused aspirations to perform. First time I did it, I just finished rugby, and I felt coming away from the event that there was more in me, that I could have pushed myself, and that kind of regret hung still hankers in me. So I was like, well, I'm going to go back and I'm going to go harder, and I'm going to really, like, this time, kind of let it all loose, if you want. And 2 days in, it was just there, gone past in April. 2 days in, I just had a slight oversight in my technical preparation where I've one foot that's slightly longer than the other, and I bought trainers that were just slightly too small. And when my feet swelled in the desert, the the toes on the front end of my left foot were pushing into the front of the trainer. So it meant that I couldn't run as I had planned as much as of the terrain that was actually runnable for me. I'm not an ultra runner. Walking around at 19 stone, 120 odd kilos. So I'm the furthest thing from that. But at the same time, I trained to run as much of it as I could. So, and I had this real pull to go back and, push myself as hard as I could. And from that point on day two, I couldn't. And that was really disappointing to me. And, I just had to basically hike the rest of the um, the race to get it done. And that's not what I was there for. So I really walked away with, if I walked away in 2016 with slight regrets, they got vastly multiplied in 2025. So I'm sure I'll go back again at some point and try to undo those regrets. But again, it would be a stretch to say a failure as such because I completed the race. But um, based on um, based on my standards, the goal I set myself, and the quality of work I hold myself to, it wasn't that. So I do have unfinished business there as well.
And if you don't mind me asking, how did you find the running? Your from your rugby background and the weight for you probably needed to thrive in that environment. Being a ultra marathon runner, it probably requires a different set of skills. Did you have to lose weight for the run, if you don't mind me asking, or did you have to change a lot of change a lot of your routines?
Yeah, you have to adapt your preparation to a certain extent. You know, my the history for me was that in the day I finished the Marathon des Sables in 2016 was before I started my preparation for the 2025 race. The history was I hadn't run at all in that period. I'm not drawn to running naturally because it's because of my size, and it's just my profile as well in terms of being a professional rugby player, and um, the hangover of movement issues that's just going to bring you. That's an absolute brutal sport, and it really, no matter how much you endeavor to undo some of the damage post, it'll still always be there. It's beaten into you. So, I hadn't run much at all in the preceding 9 years, but I had a good training period, and I love that side of it. I do all my own preparation programs, right? All the kind of across the full spectrum from physical, mental, emotional. Um, and it's really a big passion of mine. So the training period went quite well. I had a few problems in terms of like the, especially with my Achilles tendon. I had a few tendon issues because of the lack of running and then the volume. which was a pity because it kind of took away a little bit. But still, all that being said, by the time I got to April 25, I think it was trained for about a year, 9 months to a year. I was in a good place. I lost a bit of weight, but not a huge amount, and yeah, just raised my running capacities quite dramatically in that 9 months. Like now, let's be very clear here. I wasn't winning any ultra marathons or competing in them, but I was significantly prepared for the demands of the race.
Brilliant, Damien. And you transitioned then to being a speaker and a coach. Was that something on top of your mind when you were doing the adventures, or?
Like, so it was like I was my own human guinea pig for a long time. Um, the physical side of it, I had a really good knowledge of, and that was based on years and years of training under experts in that field. Through professional rugby and all the strength and conditioning coaches. As I said, I took a lot of agency on my preparation, so I would talk to them a lot individually and learned a lot from them. And then post rugby, I also did some training with a guy called Charles Poliquin, um, who was a world class strength coach. So that side of it, I was basically standing on the shoulders of giants. But the other side of it, the mental and emotional side, was very much my own. Like I just started to, through my own trials and tribulations, I realized that this was the real missing piece in high performance. So I started to just try to understand exactly what I was doing to mentally and emotionally that was so deeply rewarding and powerful and enlightening and fulfilling, really. And then put structure on that. And then, so through that period, then, like, which we're talking 8 or 9 years here of kind of being my own human guinea pig and learning firstly what I was doing and then formalizing it and um, putting it into frameworks and methodologies and systems. There, there, there was elicited in me a real drive to share it, like a dutiful drive. So that's kind of how the step into coaching came. Um, into that kind of human potential, self mastery, self realization, self actualization. If we look at the works of like Maslow and others in that area, the last piece in self actualization is service. Service to others. So it was kind of a natural step, even though I didn't know it was a natural step, but you kind of drawn to that when you get to a certain point in your own journey to mastery. So yeah, I set up a what we call the Iron Mind Institute. It's about 2 years ago now, and that's what we coach people in. We coach people in realizing their potential through physical endeavor. Because um, if there's one thing that is true, you can read as many books as you want, you can listen to as many podcasts, but without action, there's a big ceiling on you. You need to do, you need to perform, you need to take action. So it's all true. It's all done through physical endeavor and learning to deal with your mind and your emotions and uplift yourself spiritually. And I'm not talking about like 21st century kind of spirituality. I'm talking about things like um, deep rooted attributes that are hard to or states that are hard to move the needle on, like self respect, self belief, self awareness, self worth, self trust, self governance. So, yeah, so that's kind of where the coaching side of it came from. And the speaking side, just lots of people were interested in hearing the story. And I resisted it for a long time, but you I resisted it out of fear, like, because I didn't see myself as a public speaker. But again, it's part of the journey, right? Like, if you're pushing yourself and you realize you're not committing to this because you're afraid, well then you step into it. So that was that was where that came from. And I really enjoy it. I enjoy the challenge of it. I enjoy sharing what I've learned and trying to give people a little bit of tangible value to have in their own journeys.
Thanks for sharing, Damien. And I love, there's a quote, and I'm not sure what year you said it in. My purpose in life is self actualization. To live an extraordinary life, my life will be my masterpiece.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like a mindset, like if you see yourself as a kind of artisan, and you're creating um pieces of art as you go, or you're creating something, right? Like if you take the North Atlantic Row, that was that was something in itself. It was a creation, right? It was a creation of experience, not just for me, but for others, not just for my family, but for extended family, um, for anyone who tuned in on any level through the podcast, through the social media stuff. So we have the ability now to touch people. They had anywhere between a very, very, very small experience due to mine, or maybe something a bit more impactful or substantial. So that in itself is a creation. So it's about creating these experiences that touch not only you but others. And I think if you continue through life and live through those meaningful endeavors, you'll look back and you'll see your whole journey as this masterpiece that you put together, even though, I don't go around thinking, oh, I need to add to the masterpiece today. Like, it's just a mindset that sits within me. And sometimes it can be real energy inducing when you fall on it.
Brilliant. And I'd love to know just one last thing. If you were to go back to your younger self and give them one piece of advice, what would that be?
This is a question I struggle with. And I always kind of try and figure out, why do I struggle with this question so much? And I think it's because I think advice, like, is we're all on our own paths, right? And the only way to the only way to truly tread your own path is to make it. Like you can follow for a little bit, but sooner or later you're going to have to step off the path and make your own path. So that's what I feel I've done. And I don't know if there's anything I would like to say to myself as a young fella, like, because I definitely don't want to avoid any of the mistakes I made, because they were deeply formative and impactful, and they continue, as shit as they feel, right? As bad as they feel in the experience and all the bits and pieces, the negativity that resonates through us and that we have to live through or grieve through or whatever it might be. They, I think if you come from a place of wholeheartedness, they really inform you, and help you uh, make your own path. Um, so I wouldn't I would try to not say too much to myself, if that makes any sense.
No, definitely, definitely. We all have
Yeah.
our own path in life, and as you mentioned, the common theme from this conversation is the failures and the mistakes are the most important part of the journey, or it's where you got the most amount of learning from anyway.
Yeah, they're not to be avoided. Like, I think negativity, like, although we're all wired, the human is wired to avoid it and to distract and to just do whatever is needed to do to stop it. Within it, if you just sit in it for a little bit longer, if you find the awareness to get yourself to sit in it, there's so much there. There's so much there to be discovered about ourselves and about life. And so, yeah, I, when we often, when you're asked a question like that, you kind of scan back and you think about these big moments of what of whatever failure, doubt, negativity, these where you fucked up. Um, but uh, but within them, there was real deep learning and deep growth. So I wouldn't, as much as they were shitty to live through, I wouldn't point myself in a different direction to try and avoid them, because um, I wouldn't. I'm very happy and content where I'm at, and I wouldn't be here if I did that.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Damien. I appreciate you taking the time, and the conversation was enlightening. And I think my main takeaway is the mistakes and the failure aspect are important and not to be avoided. And
Hmm.
is there anything? I know you have a lot going on at the moment. Is there anything for anyone watching you'd love them to check out or to research or to maybe follow your socials or?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, social media is a great place, and trying to put out some stuff there of substance and meaning. So yeah, a good place to kind of follow along would be LinkedIn or Instagram. Damian Browne on LinkedIn or on Instagram at Owlstock, AULD_stock. And yeah, that'd be about it.
Thanks, Shane. Would last thing would love to know. So I know it said last thing before. How you got the name or the handle Old Stock? Was it a
It's just it's a term of endearment that I always kind of used, loved using from a young age, even though it kind of belied those years. And a lot of my friends started to use it, so I don't know. I kind of just started with it on LinkedIn, or not on LinkedIn, on Instagram, many moons ago, and yeah, just kind of kept it.
amazing? Thanks, Damon. And yeah, that was a brilliant conversation.
Great, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
No worries. One sec. I'll
Nice one.
just thanks, Damon. Just end the recording.